Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to be here today and excited to have you all here join us for the first of hopefully many innovation speaker series. The Atlantic Canada Climate Network is proud to co-present this event with the Canadian Environmental Network. We have come together for this project to showcase cutting-edge emerging technologies and their potential to advance climate solutions and create new opportunities. We are also recognizing the potential for these to overlap with our SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. Specifically, during this session, we're going to highlight on SDG 9, which is Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, of course, SDG 13, which is Climate Action, and SDG 17, which is Partnerships for the Goals. And we'll throw in a little SDG 3 for everybody, which is some good health and well being. So, before I begin, I would like to respectfully recognize and acknowledge the relationship that First Nations, Inuit, and Metis across Canada have had with the land all Canadians live on and enjoy. We would like to recognize that the ACCN specifically operates on traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki nations, or the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as Innu and Inuit peoples. This territory is covered by treaties of peace and friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of land and resources, but in fact established rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. And it is, of course, in the spirit of peace and friendship that I greet you all here today. It also reminds us that each of the 634 different First Nation communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. We encourage all Canadians and visitors to this land to learn about and regularly acknowledge the historic and current relationship that exists between the unceded land on which we live and work and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also encourage all Canadians to consider how they can personally contribute to Canada's reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. The Innovation Speaker Series aims to foster collaboration and knowledge exchange amongst diverse stakeholders passionate about addressing climate change. So, this edition of the series will focus on the critical issue of waste management and how innovative technologies can help revolutionize the way we approach this challenge. We have today Emergent Waste Solutions. They've garnered significant attention for their groundbreaking approaches to waste management, aiming to minimize environmental impacts and create sustainable futures. Through advanced technological solutions and a commitment to research and development, they have developed pioneer methods to reduce, repurpose, and recycle waste materials effectively. So today we're going to hear from Kevin Hall. Kevin is a sales and marketing expert with extensive experience in sales roles in various different industries. His most recent experience is an investor relations manager for a junior mining company, where he worked on improving the image of the company through targeted marketing campaigns and managing trade shows as well as funds for exploration. Previously, Kevin founded Actiska, Akitisa, I believe that's called, marketing in Calgary, Alberta, focusing on aiding companies with their marketing strategy and, of course, developing marketing materials. Besides extensive sales training, Kevin has a degree in business admin, and he is also presenting for us today on behalf of Emergent Waste Solutions and will present their transformative technologies, sharing insight into their research, development process, and successful implementation strategies. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin. Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation today. Before I start, I want to express my appreciation to the Atlantic Canada Climate Network and the Canadian Environmental Network for creating and hosting this speaker series. This presentation is set against the backdrop of out-of-control forest fires across Canada, record-setting climate events all over the world, including floods, droughts, extreme weather situations. So let's go on to the presentation. If you're looking at my screen, you should see Emergent Waste Solutions and our logo. Some 14 years ago, Brian Gusko, a co-founder, along with some other friends and associates, became aware that the climate challenge was on the way. And we started Emergent Waste Solutions, or as we call it, EWS Canada, with a view to finding and bringing to the market new technologies that could contribute climate solutions. Toward that end, we considered what could have the greatest and most immediate impact on climate change. We recognized that one of the major factors contributing to pollution, and more specifically to climate change, is waste, garbage. We brought our focus to this subject and discovered a technology that really is the ultimate in recycling. Through this slideshow, I will show you how our advanced thermolysis system, or ATS, can revolutionize how waste is managed. So why focus on waste? Why did we choose that? Well, according to the US Environmental Protection Agency, landfills are among the US's largest sources of methane, a greenhouse gas much more potent than carbon dioxide and a major contributor to global climate change. A seminal UN report published in May found that immediate reductions in methane emissions caused by decomposing organic materials are the best and swiftest chance the planet has at slowing climate change. I myself spoke personally with an engineer employed by the LA County who had requested that NASA use one of their satellites to detect methane sources in Southern California. They were assuming it would be some of the large area farms. But the data gathered from this event confirmed that landfills are indeed the greatest source of human-caused methane emissions. So what is our solution? Thermolysis, oftentimes called pyrolysis. Thermolysis can bring us near zero on the emissions side. And it takes place when a carbon-based material is subjected to a very high temperature in the absence of oxygen. So without the oxygen, there's no combustion, there's no incineration. But that high temperature acts on the material to crack it at the molecular level and splitting it into the three constituent elements of a biogas, a biooil, and carbon. EWS is Canadian owned and managed, and our technology is among the best in the world. It was developed over a 25-year period. Earlier generations of the tech have been operating commercially for over 15 years. We are not in R&D, although we continually look to improve, and we're not at the pilot plant stage. Our ATS is running commercially here in Canada, and we've built business cases for projects overseas. The objective is to process waste before it decomposes and releases all of its gases. Capturing the gases from stack emissions is great, and I applaud the tremendous work that's been done in that area. However, it's somewhat like closing the barn door after the horses have escaped, isn't it? How much better would it be to not put all those gases up the stack to begin with? So what can the advanced thermolysis system, our ATS, process? It's easier to look and say, what can't we process? Metal, glass, and rocks cannot go through the system. Everything else can go in. And the primary product we create, noted on the top right side, is biochar. This is where we get the greatest impact on climate change. Now, the other products shown here also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. By returning the fossil fuels that went into the products to begin with back to the supply chain, we reduce the need for further raw fossil fuel extraction.
Not sure that I.
So, given our limited time here in this event today, we'll focus on the biochar while making note of the others. Biochar stands to make the greatest impact. We make it in our ATS reactors from every input except the tires and plastics. By making biochar from waste, we can see as much as a 1/3 reduction in GHG emissions right off the bat. And further to that immediate reduction, the application of biochar, particularly in agriculture, can further reduce climate emissions. As an example, when cattle ingest biochar as a component of their feed, their methane emissions can be reduced by as much as 12.5% to 22%. A Harvard study evaluating more than 150 scientific papers on adding biochar to livestock feed showed, in most of the studies and for all investigated livestock species, positive effects on parameters like toxin absorption, digestion, blood values, feed use efficiency and livestock weight gain, meat quality, and GHG emissions. I want to draw your attention to the electrode in the middle box on the right-hand side of this screen. This is a nickel mesh coated with our biochar. EWS joined with Dr. Amir Dahota, a UBC doctoral graduate, to test his hypothesis that a modified biochar can create a highly conductive carbon black. On his first attempt with his doctoral thesis, the modification did not produce the sought-after result. However, Dr. Amir then learned about our biochar and cured a sample to test at the university lab. He was impressed enough with the purity of our biochar that he asked EWS if we would join him on a grant application to redo his thesis. On this second attempt with our biochar, he was successful. And the highly conductive carbon black that he made can potentially replace graphene in some applications. Graphene, of course, is derived from graphite, which is mined, often in open pit minings, and has a very high carbon footprint. And this is just one example of the amazing properties of biochar. Haven't we all been told for decades that the economic impact of tackling climate change is simply too great? Well, if you're anything like me, you also realized decades ago that this is pure unmitigated bullshit. And my colleague Brian and I recognized that 14 years ago. Now, there's no question that moving away from fossil fuels and properly managing waste will adversely affect the bottom line of industries that have created billionaires at the expense of our ecosystems. But should that really be our overriding concern when the very survival of our planet as we know it is hanging in the balance? In the following slides, we're going to look at a number of the major waste streams society creates. To begin with, we look at municipal solid waste, also called MSW. Here we find the opportunity for the greatest positive impact on GHG emissions. Now, interestingly, citizens are calling for a better way of dealing with society's waste, while municipalities and regional districts are unaware that there is a better way. Composting technology has made great strides, and that's where regional districts and municipalities usually go, which is definitely commendable. However, the very decomposition of organic waste necessary to the creation of the compost results in the GHG emissions we're trying to reduce. It is into this rock and hard place quandary that EWS offers our ATS solution. Simply put, the ATS can replace a landfill. Furthermore, we can do so without raising taxes or putting the municipality or regional district into a long-term debt situation. The ATS solution is not only viable environmentally, but it's also economically sustainable. If a municipality simply diverts the cost of operating a landfill to paying a tipping fee in combination with revenue from the products created. We can offer a multi-year solution that will eliminate pollution and significantly reduce GHG emissions. Just this year, EWS engineered a new generation of our ATS and filed patent claims around it. With this new engineering, we do not use the biogas created by our thermolysis process to create heat for our reactors. This slide shows that we have synthetic gas being created and used as a fuel source for the plant. That is the way previous ATS installations have operated, and the one we have currently running here in BC on First Nations land. But going forward, we will not use the syngas for that. Later in this presentation, I'll explain the significance. Now, the spreadsheet here is a forecast based on our data from existing plant operations. I don't have time within the constraints of this talk to delve into these financial details, but I do want to remind you that this presentation will be made available to anyone who requests a copy. Suffice it to say at this juncture that the profit potential of an ATS installation is capable of making capitalists into unwitting environmentalists. Sewage biosolids. Have a read on that screen. Spreading sewage sludge on your land will poison your soil, kill your livestock, and get you sued. In Canada, we're late to the lawsuit game because, of course, we're Canada. But class action suits in the USA are already gathering momentum. There are very troubling issues surrounding the campaign to sell sewage solids as benign fertilizer. And it should be noted that the decomposition of sewage sludge is also giving off GHGs. I met with a residuals manager for a prominent regional district here in Canada to present a better way of dealing with sewage sludge. After I explained that the sludge would be subjected to a very high temperature for 15 minutes in an oxygen-deprived environment, this engineer looked across the table and said, "How do we know what you're doing with it makes it safe?" Now, in my defense, I should mention the engineer had just gotten through telling me that spreading the raw sludge on rangeland was totally safe. I looked back across the table and replied, "Well, we don't have any portals on our system where we can introduce pharmaceuticals, chemicals, heavy metals, or pathogens, which is in your raw sewage sludge. So if you're confident in the safety of this sludge, how can you even ask that question?" And that may have been a bit of bridge burning there. But I'm telling you the story to make the point that one of the greatest obstacles to us rolling out the ATS on a wide scale is simply that our entrenched institutions, especially here in Canada, are terribly fearful of coloring outside the lines. So I went to talk to some of our First Nations people who lived beside the rangeland application of biosolids, find out for myself how safe the sewage sludge really is. Among other things, they told me of deer that they had harvested from the area where the sludge was applied. And the deer had horrible green cancerous growths in their bodies. When you consider that grazing cattle don't neatly clip the grass off at ground level like a pair of shears, but rather tear it out and consume some of the dirt it grows in, you might feel a bit queasy at the thought of what is in that dirt when you eat your steak. A couple of years ago, I created a document that lays out the current way that sewage sludge is handled and why that is problematic on several levels. In my paper for the section on current practices and their dangers, I borrowed from the work of Dr. Marilyn Cameron, a well-respected Nova Scotian doctor and a founding member of the organization No Farms, No Food. So the knowledge is coming. Organizations and groups like the ones who have hosted this event today know what's going on. I found studies published from 5 different countries and 9 different universities, each of them reaching the conclusion that the best way to deal with sewage sludge is by way of pyrolysis. Composting did not get a mention. One of the interesting things you'll see from these clippings here is that heavy metals are actually trapped in the porous structure of biochar. And where plants were grown in biochar created from the sewage sludge, those heavy metals were not absorbed by the root systems and taken up into the stalk and the fruit of the plants. Interesting also, on the right-hand side here on this screen, from the UK, 17 of the most thermally stable pharmaceuticals were tested in the trial, which revealed that thermolysis technology destroys over 99% of 10 of the pharmaceuticals and an average of 94% of the remaining 7. So we have not only a reduction in GHGs if we process the sewage sludge properly, but a healthier environment all around. I grew up, as many Canadians have, in a logging town. I remember fresh snowfalls that became black with fly ash within days. We never thought anything about it. It was just something we put up with for the sake of well-paying jobs and a good place to live. However, we've come to since realize the true hazards of living with wood smoke. And ironically enough, with forest fires exacerbated by climate change, people in major cities have also come to realize it. But we've still not come to a full realization of what wood waste is contributing. Because quite apart from the health impacts of wood smoke, wood waste that is buried, used in compost, or applied in landscaping is still decomposing and giving off its latent GHGs. ATS plants can make valuable biochar from wood waste and prevent as much as 1/3 of those GHGs from being released. Plastics. Every day it seems there's a new story about how plastics are causing serious stress to our planet. Whether it's wildlife that's ingesting plastic and dying, or carpets of plastic blocking the sun from waterways and adversely affecting the ecosystem, or the microplastics that are now being found in the organs, bloodstreams, and brains of people, we know that plastics are a scourge. But it doesn't have to be this way. ATS can take virtually all types of plastics and create a light diesel product that can further offset the extraction of new fossil fuels. So we have a means of dealing with plastic, and it's now simply a matter of the will to do something about it. And with ATS, plastics become, again, economically sustainable in their recycling. So there's really no excuse for the way we dispose of our plastics. I show you this map because EWS has targeted some projects in Philippines, which has, for a small geographically sized area, a lot of impact on plastics. So we have a shovel-ready project in Philippines. It's waiting on financing, but we're ready to make an impact there. And again, speaking about the economic viability of properly processing plastics, and this will only get more profitable as time goes on because the price of fuel will go up. And now we come to tires. And I think we all understand that waste tires are a blight on our landscape. Seeing the tire dumps and the stacks of tires. And when they catch fire, these tire dumps can burn for years. What you might not be aware of is that the elements that have gone into the tires also contribute to GHG emissions. Carbon black, a material derived from fossil fuels, is added to rubber compounds to give it better wear and flexibility. This material has a very high carbon footprint in its creation. But with ATS, we can recapture that carbon black and return it to the supply chain. We can also recover oil equivalent to a number two home heating oil, and we recover biogases. And I want to emphasize something here. The current practice of simply crumbing the tires and putting it on children's playing fields or in landscaping applications is not a solution to the problem of waste tires. The tire crumb degrades from exposure to the elements and the friction of being played on and becomes a toxic dust for the children to inhale as they play. So we did some research and found the studies and verified that, and that can be shared. Again, tires are a very profitable application for our ATS. And we have a business case developed for a tire recycling project in Ghana, West Africa, where we'll take mining tires that are buried and sometimes burned and properly process them. Brian and I were there for 2 weeks near the end of last year. We spoke to everybody from the EPA to the mines themselves and to the politicians who would be involved in helping us get established over there. And in all of that, we found tremendous support for us having a project there. And in fact, through our Ghanaian partners, we approached the recyclers who are known to sometimes burn those mining tires to recover the metals. And we reached a deal with them that if they deliver the tires to us rather than taking it out into the forest where they can't be seen and burning them there, we will give them back in clean metal, not contaminated by a burn, the equivalent amount of recycled or recaptured metal. So we're not going to put the recycling people out of business or challenge their way of life. We're going to make things simpler for them and make it more profitable for them. And in exchange for that, we have their full cooperation. Biocoal. Sometimes you'll hear biocoal used to refer to simply a pelleted bit of wood waste. But that's not really what biocoal is. So talking about biocoal is, unfortunately, it's not realistic to expect that we will shut down all the coal-fired power plants in the world all at once. But until we do reach that point, EWS can create a product that reduces climate emissions while allowing existing power plants to keep functioning. Now, please let me be clear here. I am not saying that burning fossil fuels is necessary or that we should coddle the coal and coal burning industries. With alternative energy sources, coal can be replaced tomorrow. We know that. However, realistically speaking, that's not going to happen. And so we offer a means of reducing emissions during the transition period. Toward that end, EWS is able to take a variety of waste materials, create refuse-derived fuel pellets, which you see in this picture, and then torrefy them. Now, the torrefication process is the same process we use to create biochar, but with lower heat and less reactor time. The torrefied pellet is lighter than the RDF, refuse-derived fuel pellet you see in this picture, reducing shipping costs. It is also hydrophobic, allowing for less loss due to moisture exposure, and it's easier and cheaper to store. It also burns cleaner with fewer emissions than either RDFs or coal. We have actually at EWS a standing order for 25,000 tons a month of our torrefied pellets, our bio coal. And we have a project site picked out. We have the logistics worked on. And again, it's simply lacking financing. As we come near the end of the talk here, just a couple more slides left, I want to point out that the ATS technology itself is not in question. It's not, does this work? Will it work beyond the lab? Will it work on a commercial scale? These people who are eminently qualified to assess our technology and the biochar we make with it have all given their endorsements to our ATS. Now here's a slide, and this is last because this is just happening now. And I've alluded to this earlier. We've been looking for a hydrogen economy for decades. But hydrogen has been a very difficult thing to work with. We think we've got a solution. This month, EWS signed a memorandum of understanding with a technology company in Southern California that defines a technology cooperation relationship. Hago Energetics has developed a means of taking the biogas created by our ATS and making methanol from it. And a cubic liter of methanol has more hydrogen molecules in it than does a cubic liter of hydrogen. Sounds counterintuitive, but the reasons come back to hydrogen is a real bugger to work with. To create it in a green fashion, so you're getting more out of it than you got in it, and to containerize it and transport it, store it, and then deliver it to the device that needs that fuel. So making the methanol gives us a safe and simple way to transport hydrogen. Additionally, we're in discussions right now with a NASDAQ listed company that can use that methanol that we would create with Hago as a delivery mechanism for the hydrogen used by their fuel cells. These relationships signal a breakthrough for the fuel cell industry, and for EWS, it allows an even further reduction of emissions from our waste management solution, enabling us to run very close to zero emissions. So, what does EWS need in order to make a climate change impact with our ATS technology? And specifically, how can you help? Right now, we're still a privately owned company. However, we're in active talks with several publicly listed companies called shells regarding a reverse takeover that would see us become a public company. While we work towards that, we are accepting equity investments in EWS at 25 cents a share. If you'd like to play a part in the story of how ATS technology mitigates climate change, please consider becoming an owner of EWS. If you are someone or you know someone who could be a strategic partner of EWS, like Hago Energetics and the fuel cell company in the past slide, please reach out to me. This could be a buyer of the products we make, or a synergistic technology partner, or someone who has a waste challenge they need solved, such as a municipality or regional district with a landfill that's approaching capacity. Perhaps you have connections within the political or bureaucratic sectors of Canada or beyond Canada, and can make introductions that would allow us to get our message across to decision makers. And at the very least, it would be really appreciated if you would spread the word that Canada can offer a very viable tool in the efforts to bring climate change solutions to the fore. Again, thank you for caring enough about our planet to attend this session today. Ashley, thank you for hosting.
Always my pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Kevin, if anybody has any questions, you can unmute or drop them in the chat. Kevin would love to answer them. And as a reminder, a copy of this presentation, the slide deck, and the recording will be issued to everybody once we conclude today.
All right, you know what? I'll start the ball rolling, Kevin. It's Andrew here. Great presentation. Been a big fan for all these years, and will continue to be. Really quick, you were talking about the torrefied pellets. Can they be used in a wood pellet stove?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when we first ran wood pellets through our system to create torrefied pellets, we were not aware at that time that we would be increasing the BTU value of that pellet as much as threefold or more. And so we gave some of the pellets to a local fellow who had a wood burning stove, a pellet stove, and it scared the hell out of him. It burned so hot. He phoned us and said, I think the stove is white. Anyways, we learned something from that, and he didn't burn his house down. But those pellets are indeed ideal. And we supplied some to another fellow. And he said, with those pellets, I can actually do a mix with my existing ones. And if I fill the hopper on a Friday and go away for the weekend, my house is still warm when I come home. Because he used far less of the product. So thanks for the question.
No, not a problem. Yeah, there's a lot of people using wood pellets out this way, so yeah, it's always good to know.
Rosalind, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kevin. Really eye-opening. As someone who, my dad discovered biochar 15 years ago and used to go to climate demonstrations with a little sign saying, biochar. It's like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I know a little bit about it. I'm not a technical person. I'm wondering about scaling up. How do we scale this up? How do we take this to a community level? What might be involved in that?
Okay, thank you. Well, our smallest plant requires approximately 10 tons of input a day. So unfortunately, we're not at the level or the scale where we can go into a small community and become the alternative in that small community to a composting solution, for example, because we can't operate on the small level. Our building block plant, the one that's really the basis of our larger throughputs, is something we call the ATS 1000. And that requires about 15 or actually close to 24 tons a day of input. So we are looking at quite high volumes of waste material to make these things viable. But in terms of the scaling up, certainly these can be put all over Canada in very short order, and we can start to really address the climate emissions. Our technology is kind of a building block technology, so it's modular in that we can start with a certain size, we can add a reactor bank, and we can increase the throughput.
Thank you so much.
Kevin, so if a municipality were to approach you, how long would it take this type of system, to get up and running?
Okay, we're looking at, and it depends on where in the world we're putting something, but assuming Canada, we're looking at about a 10 to 12 month build and commission process. So there's got to be, some early engineering to determine site location. Ideally, it'll be at the site of an existing landfill if there's enough, land for that. So site location, but also engineering in terms of building on that land. Of course, you're probably sitting on many tons of decomposing waste at the landfill. And so putting any kind of structure there runs a risk of having methane contamination. So some engineering ahead of time, but that can happen simultaneous with the build process of the actual ATS machinery.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Kevin before we let everybody go?
Tough audience.
Wonderful. Well, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Kevin as well. I will send his contact information in the follow-up email that you'll receive shortly after. It will have a copy of this as well as a copy of the slide deck as well. To everybody that was able to come today, so much gratitude for all of you here. And for everybody that was unable to come, we look forward to seeing you at the next one. This is going to be a regular ongoing thing with the Atlantic Canada Climate Network, and we're looking to have our next one in September. So stay tuned for that. And of course, a huge shout out to the Canadian Environmental Network and Rosalind Warner here for helping co-facilitate and make that happen. So with
Thank
that,
you.
yeah, thank you, Kevin. We wish you all a happy Monday and hope that this last week of school flies by for you all and that we get kicked off on the summer on a great note. With that, happy solstice coming up this week, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you all for joining.
Bye.